Hey, this is Will Buchanan. I'm walking all the way across the country to New Hampshire for more freedom on a project called the Walk for Liberty. Today is December 9th, 2008, day 209. When mighty rivers freeze over. Earlier today, as I was crossing an intersection against a red light when there were no cars coming, I noticed a vehicle out of the corner of my eye which had some writing on the side. At first I thought it was a vehicle for some business, but then when I looked, it said City of Latham, Department of Public Works. I'm just glad it wasn't a cop who probably would have ticketed me for walking across the red light. But then a scenario came into my mind. That Department of Public Works guy still works for the government. What if he had tried to give me a ticket for walking across that red light? Most people, if faced with that situation, would probably say something like, "Psh, who are you? You're just a Department of Public Works guy. You can't give me a ticket." And then proceed to walk off, while the Department of Public Works guy is left standing there, dumbfounded. But then again, what's the real difference between a Department of Public Works guy and a cop? Why is it that most people will accept a ticket from a cop, but not from a Department of Public Works guy? And basically think that the cop has authority over them to give them a ticket. Some might say it's because the cop has a gun, but the Department of Public Works guy doesn't. But I don't think that's it. After all, criminals carry guns, and while you might do what they say because they have the gun, you certainly don't think they have authority over you. Criminals might get away with their activities for a time. At some point though, he'll come across a homeowner with a gun who decides he's had enough and takes the criminal out. Why is it though that cops don't get caught in that fashion for their activities against people who have committed victimless so-called crimes? For the aura of authority to exist, two factors have to be in play. One, the person in question has to think they have authority, and two, and more importantly, the people they supposedly have authority over have to think that that person has authority over them. Let's consider the separate scenarios one by one. The first is when a person thinks they have authority, but everyone else disagrees. That would be, for example, the rogue Department of Public Works guy who, when he tries to give people tickets, they just laugh him off. Or perhaps even a thief, who, while he might get away with his activities for a while, will eventually be caught and dealt with. The second case is when everyone else thinks a person has authority, but somehow that person doesn't. That could happen if someone inadvertently dresses too similarly to a cop, or perhaps a store employee. Once that person realizes that everyone else thinks they have authority, if it happens for long enough, it will likely be very difficult for that person not to grow into that role and actually start behaving as if, and even believing, that they do have authority over others. And that leads into the third case, which is if the person in question thinks they have authority over others, and most everyone else believes they do as well. That's the situation we have today with the police, and really with government in general. Certainly, cops and other people in positions of power in government do think that they have authority. But the only reason that matters is that virtually everyone else believes that they're legitimate, and that they do indeed have authority. Otherwise, it would be like the case of the Department of Public Works guy, where people would just laugh him off. Another example I heard is that in some country in Asia, I believe it was China, that the cops aren't respected or obeyed nearly as much as they are here. I heard that people will sometimes even weave in and out of traffic around cops, pretty much ignoring that they're there. Effectively, people in that country don't recognize the authority of cops nearly as much as people in America do. And therefore, the cops don't have nearly as much power there. And then there's the case of common criminals, who people certainly don't see as having authority, even though they have guns. In fact, what's the real difference between criminals and cops and government in general? Government is certainly more organized, but what about an organized gang of criminals, like the mafia? What's the difference between them and the government? The answer is, it's the perception of authority. Organized gangs are much easier to fight against because they're not seen as legitimate and almost everyone will be behind you. However, because government is almost universally seen as legitimate, almost everyone will be against you, which makes it much more difficult to fight. And that's why I definitely don't recommend using violence against cops or anyone else in government. If you use violence against someone in a gang, you at least have a chance of surviving. However, if you use violence against and kill somebody in government, then there will be an all-out assault on you until you're hunted down and killed. The only way to effectively combat the state is through education, to help them break down their perceptions of authority in it and realize that the state has legitimacy only because they think it does. And that can be done either through the educational tool of the media, whether mainstream or new media, such as blogs, or by educating them through acts of civil disobedience, to help them realize that government is just a tool of violence, which inflicts harm upon people who haven't hurt anyone. The only way to get rid of the state is to help enough people realize that its authority is an illusion and is only in their heads. I walked 20.3 miles for Liberty today. Here are my GPS coordinates. If you do any of your shopping online, please purchase through amazon.walkforliberty.com, and a percentage of your purchase will go to support the Walk for Liberty. Amazon, Amazon, amazon.walkforliberty.com. This is Will Buchanan, very dizzily, signing off. Girly Avenue, yeah. Yeah, that avenue should be in the town of Manius. Town of Pitts Town.